Ever hear of a case where official paperwork says one thing and the guy who lived through it says something else entirely? Where the report lists bear activity and dehydration, and the man himself is sitting in his apartment 3 years later, blinds pulled, staring at the tree line. I want to tell you about Wesley Crawford. I've been chasing this for a while. Started when somebody forwarded me a thread, a sprawling forum post from a guy in Elkins, West Virginia, claiming his neighbor walked out of the Monongahela woods in the fall of 2022 and was never the same. The neighbor's name was right there, Wesley. 38, freight logistics, not a drinker, not a guy who made stuff up. Honestly, I almost passed. I get a dozen of these a month, but there was one line I couldn't put down. Wes says the woods aren't fighting themselves anymore. He says they already lost. I don't know, man. Something about that phrasing. It didn't read like a cooked-up monster tale. It read like somebody quoting something they couldn't set aside. So I started digging, pulled county records, spoke with 2 deputies who answered the call on Route 33 west of Elkins. I got Wesley's hospital intake summary through a mutual friend, just the top sheet, but enough to work with. After 8 months of back and forth, Wesley agreed to sit down. Not on tape. He was very specific about no recordings, so I took notes on a legal pad at his kitchen table. We drank coffee. He kept glancing out the sliding glass door at the tree line behind his property. Every few minutes, almost unconsciously, he'd reach over and check the lock. Let me walk you through what happened, exactly how he told it. Late October 2022, a Friday. Wesley and his buddy Jonah Prescott loaded up Jonah's beat-up older truck and drove from Charleston toward the Monongahela National Forest. 2 guys in their late 30s, high school friends who fished together a few times a year. This was supposed to be a long weekend. Brook trout, cold mornings, a tent, some beers. That was the whole plan. Jonah knew the area. I mean, he really knew it. Before moving into construction management, he'd spent 6 years as a ranger in the Monongahela. He'd hiked every trail on the Shavers Fork side twice. He knew which outfitters were honest and who sold bad line. So when he told Wesley where they were going, Wesley just let him drive. They pulled off Route 33 west of the Shavers Fork Ridge around 2 in the afternoon. Wesley couldn't name the exact turnout, just a dirt break in the guardrail, but Jonah knew it. He parked on flat gravel, maybe 40 yards off the highway, behind young pines so the truck wouldn't be obvious. That detail, the distance and cover, matters later. 40 yards in, tucked behind trees. They geared up. Rods, small pack, lightweight tent, 1 day's food in a bear canister, the rest left in the vehicle. The plan was a 3-mile hike to a chain of small lakes Jonah had visited dozens of times as a ranger. Before setting off, Jonah looked at him and said, Wesley wanted to get this wording right. Hey, hikers been avoiding these lakes lately. Forums say animals are acting weird up here. Might see less traffic than usual. They hiked in. Gorgeous, dry, cold afternoon. Leaves mostly down. Jonah walked point, 10 feet ahead. Wesley said the first thing that registered as off was the quiet. A mile and a half in, Jonah stopped, head tilted, listening. He didn't speak for 30 seconds. Then Jonah said, word for word, there should be more birds. That was the first crack in the day. They kept going. Pitched the tent at the smallest lake just before sundown, built a fire and fished the bank for an hour. Caught nothing, which Jonah admitted was strange. He'd pulled brook trout out of that lake every prior trip. They ate freeze-dried chili, had 1 beer each. Around 10 at night, in full dark, they heard the first sound. Wesley described it as something hitting a tree. Not a falling branch, not a clawing bear. It sounded like a grown man running into a trunk shoulder first, hard. A pause. Then it happened again 200 yards off at a different tree. He asked Jonah what it was. And Jonah, the former ranger who'd put 6 years into that ridge, said, I don't know. Everyone who knew Jonah Prescott said the same thing. He always had an answer. Deer, elk, bear, bobcat, owl. He could name any Appalachian sound with his eyes shut. He wasn't a guy who said, I don't know, about his own woods. He said, "I don't know. Let's get in the tent." They didn't sleep, lay there fully dressed, boots laced, listening to something walk a loop around the camp for 20 minutes. Not close, maybe 80 yards out, but pacing, like it was measuring them. Around 2 in the morning, the pacing stopped. A long stretch of nothing followed. Wesley drifted off around 4. At dawn, Jonah was already sitting up, staring at the tent wall like a man who hadn't blinked in hours. They didn't talk about it. They just packed up. Without discussing it, both decided they were heading back. Here's where things get strange differently. The hike out should have taken 2 hours. It took 5. Wesley said the trail just wasn't the trail. They hit a creek that shouldn't have been there, one Jonah didn't recognize at all. They ended up navigating by the sun and the ridge's slope. When they finally pushed through to the gravel turnout, it was almost noon. And the vehicle was gone. Well, it was still there, but it wasn't a vehicle anymore. The roof was pressed down, like something sat on it. Not crashed, not rolled. Sat on. The metal had that specific inward curve from a massive, steady overhead weight. The windshield was intact, just bowed inward. The hood had 4 long grooves raked across it, deep enough for Wesley to sink his fingers into, spaced way too far apart for any bear. Jonah walked around it twice. First pass, silence. On the second, he crouched at the edge of the gravel, stayed quiet for a long while, then waved Wesley over. 2 sets of tracks, side by side. The first were footprints, not boots, bare feet. Massive, 18 or 19 inches long, 5 toes, deep heel. A real, human-shaped foot. The stride was easily 5.5 feet. The second set, running parallel at the same pace, were different. Jonah stared at them. When Wesley asked what they were, Jonah murmured, "That's a canid, but the weight distribution is wrong. Those are pads on a plantigrade foot. That's walking upright." Jonah stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said, "That's a wolf that walks like a man." Then he said, "We need to go, right now." They went. I'm pausing here, because what Wesley said happened over the next 36 hours took me 8 months to decide if I believed. Honestly, I'm still not sure. They abandoned the vehicle. Jonah figured whatever did that was still close, so the smart move was hitting Route 33 to flag someone down. The highway was only 40 yards through the pines. They could hear traffic. A semi had rolled past 10 minutes earlier. Except, and Wesley kept circling back to this at his kitchen table, they couldn't find the highway. 40 yards is home plate to first base. You can see through pines that thin and hear a diesel engine for a mile. Yet these 2 men, one a former ranger who'd navigated worse blindfolded, couldn't find a 2-lane blacktop 40 yards away. Jonah played it cool at first, said the wind was distorting the sound, or they'd drifted north. But after 30 minutes of pushing through brush that refused to become a road, Jonah stopped, took a breath, and said, "Wes, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know where we are." Twice in 12 hours, Jonah Prescott said, "I don't know" about woods he'd worked for 6 years. They tried getting a handle on it. Jonah pulled his father's old brass compass, picked a heading, south-southwest, which logically should hit the highway within an hour. They walked. Wesley kept looking over his shoulder, feeling he was about to catch sight of something between the trunks, but found nothing. Just gray-brown October forest. The moment he turned around, he'd feel it again. You know that feeling, the back of the neck prickle. Usually it's nothing. This wasn't one of those times. 2 hours in, still no highway. Jonah checked the compass against the sun. They didn't agree. He tapped the glass. The needle swung, settled, swung again. He muttered, "That's not supposed to happen. Might be sitting on an iron ore deposit pulling the needle. Rare, but it happens." Wesley asked how rare. Jonah didn't answer. They kept walking. Around 3, they descended into a low drainage, A seam between ridges Jonah didn't recognize, though he'd stopped pretending to recognize anything, and smelled it before they saw it. Wesley said the smell was hardest to describe. I asked 4 ways, he gave 4 answers. Wet dog, copper, a dirty barn. Underneath it all, something like a battery. Neither of us knew what that meant. "It was like a battery, man," he kept saying. They crested a rise, looked into the drainage, and Jonah grabbed Wesley's jacket, yanking him flat. Lying on his belly in the leaves, Wesley looked down. 200 yards out was an unnatural clearing. Young trees in a rough oval were bent over and pressed flat, like something walked the perimeter and crushed everything below knee height. Standing in that clearing were the Bigfoots. He counted 5 of them, twice. Before you roll your eyes, I asked the obvious questions. Bears on hind legs? People in suits? He looked at me like I asked if the sun was a flashlight. No, not bears, not people. They were what they were. 2 big males, maybe 8 feet tall. A smaller one around 7. 2 in-between teenagers or females, all facing north, completely still. Not interacting, just staring at something in the far tree line. 30 feet aside, in dimmer brush, Wesley saw the other shapes, 4 of them, crouched but not on all 4s. Wolf heads with wrong proportions, skulls too long, jaws too heavy. When one shifted, its shoulders rolled like a man's, not an animal's. Those were the werewolves, doing exactly what the Bigfoots were doing. Staring north. Jonah, flat in the leaves next to Wesley. Why? Understand what Jonah was seeing. 6 years of Appalachian Ranger stories. Tall ones on ridges, things howling on wrong nights. Stories you joked about in break rooms but didn't at 3 a.m. trailheads. Jonah had told Wesley he'd never seen either of them. Heard things, found impossible prints, had sleepless nights, sure, but never actually laid eyes on one. Now he was looking at both, 40 feet apart, not fighting. That wasn't just impossible. It suggested something else was true, and that something was worse than either of them. Here's the detail that bothers me most. Jonah whispered to Wesley, "Look at the trees." The trees on the north side, where everyone stared, were gray. Stripped, Wesley called it. Bark hung in vertical ribbons, peeled downward like sunburned skin. The wood beneath was pale and wet. The canopy still held needles and leaves, but the trunks were flayed. The air in front of them moved wrong, like heat shimmer in 42-degree weather. That was what they were watching. Halfway across the clearing, between the sentries and the trees, lay a body. Wesley struggled to describe the body. It had been a werewolf. Legs, arms, and head were intact, but the chest was open, not torn or ripped. He used the word unfolded, like something the same size had emerged from inside it, like an emptied, open suitcase. No violent scatter, just a thing no longer occupied. Jonah saw it, and his face shifted from confusion to clarity. They aren't hunting each other. They're standing guard. That was the first piece they understood. Bigfoots and werewolves, mortal enemies in every Appalachian legend, had formed a united line, facing something in those flayed trees that had already taken one of them, yet forced the rest to hold their ground. Then the thing came out. Wesley was careful here, admitting he couldn't describe it well. His phrase was that his eyes wouldn't hold on to it. He'd look, and his gaze would slide off, like staring at the sun through water. He gave me this. It was taller than the 8-foot Bigfoots, thin with stretched proportions, limbs too long for its body, dark like charred wood inside a neglected fireplace. It moved in violent jerks. Step, freeze, step, freeze. Where its face should be was just a blur his eyes refused to process. And the thing wasn't breathing. Jonah noticed it first, breathing the words. "It's not breathing, Wes." Every other creature in that clearing had frost plumes venting into the cold air. 9 columns of white breath. The tall thing had none. Lying there, Jonah's ranger brain kept working while the rest of him shut down. He whispered, word for word, "Look at the big ones. Look at their chests." Wesley looked. The Bigfoots weren't breathing normally. They took tiny, shallow sips, fighting to keep their chests still. The werewolves were lower, but Wesley swore their flanks were motionless, like they'd simply paused themselves. Jonah whispered, "It doesn't see or smell. It hears hearts." The moment Jonah said that, Wesley's heart tripled in volume, a drum beating inside his skull. He clamped his hands over his mouth, trying to slow his breathing, but you can't politely ask your heart to slow down. You can control your breath and eyes, but you cannot tell your heart, "Quiet, please." Across the clearing, the breathless thing turned its head. Slowly, in that jerking, halting way, it turned toward the ridge where they lay flat in the leaves. I have to pause here. It's rough, but this is where Wesley stopped drinking his coffee, stared at the sliding door for a full minute, and resumed with a completely different voice. Wesley told the rest in fragmented pieces. He'd drop a detail, go quiet, then circle back to add what he skipped. I'll sequence it for you, but understand, it came out broken, pulled from a place he didn't want to look. So, the thing turned its head toward them, and one of the Bigfoots moved. The biggest male stepped forward into the open, interposing itself between the sentries and the dark thing. Then it did something Wesley will never forget. It hit its chest. Not a movie display. It struck itself hard, once, directly over the heart. The impact echoed across the drainage half a second later. The tall thing's head snapped back toward the Bigfoot. Jonah figured it out first. "He's giving it a louder heart. He's pulling it off us." The Bigfoot had heard Wesley's pulse 200 yards away over everything else and decided to offer itself up. I think about this the most. If the tall thing hunted heartbeats, the sentries knew it. They had studied it, lost enough of their own, and devised a defense. When 2 human pulses stumbled into their perimeter, a Bigfoot volunteered to be the louder target. That's not an animal. I don't know what it is. The tall thing took a jerking step toward the Bigfoot. Then the Bigfoot did something Wesley still can't make sense of. It charged. Not at the tall thing, past it, toward the flayed trees. The thing pursued in hitching starts, terrifyingly fast. The remaining Bigfoots and werewolves broke formation and followed, moving without attacking. The clearing emptied northward in 10 seconds. Jonah grabbed Wesley's jacket, hissing, "Move, move, move!" They ran south downhill, sliding in leaves. Jonah held the compass without looking at it. Wesley said the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the sound behind them. The fight. Bigfoots bellowing. Werewolves making a noise like a 300-pound crying dog. Underneath it all thrummed a low, vibrating tone. Not a roar or growl, but a sound felt in your teeth and facial bones. One by one, the sounds stopped. A bellow would peak, then abruptly sever. Half a second of nothing, then the next voice started, only to be cut off too. Like checking off a list. Jonah yelled to keep moving. He was crying, tears streaming down his face as he ran, completely unacknowledged. They made maybe a mile when Jonah tripped. He fell heavy, face first. When Wesley skidded back, Jonah was pushing onto his hands and knees, pine needles on his cheek. His fishing rod, carried this whole time out of sheer terrified habit, was snapped in his hand. He was staring past Wesley, up the slope. Wesley turned. A Bigfoot had returned. Not the big one, a smaller one with a silver-gray band across its shoulders. It was the same one that nearly trampled Wesley earlier when they first hit the drainage, running south from whatever was happening. It had doubled back. 150 yards behind it, 2 werewolves moved through the brush. Not chasing them, escorting. The Bigfoot approached Jonah, bent down, and scooped him up. One arm under the knees, one under the shoulders, like a parent lifting a child. Jonah didn't fight. He looked at Wesley from the creature's arm, face utterly calm, like he'd worked something out. The Bigfoot ran south-southeast. The two werewolves fell in behind. Another Bigfoot, one Wesley hadn't noticed standing 20 feet off in the trees, stepped into view. Wesley intuitively understood. The group was splitting. Two hearts running in different directions. Give the thing a choice. Give one a chance. The young, silver-shouldered Bigfoot jerked its head west. Wesley ran. The Bigfoot loped alongside him, never touching, perfectly matching his speed stride for stride. Way behind them, Wesley heard one last thing. Jonah's Bigfoot. It roared, a massive carrying sound, a deliberate beacon saying, "Here! Here we are! Come this way!" Running west, Wesley knew the thing had picked the louder road with more hearts. Jonah, a Bigfoot, two werewolves, 4 pulses moving south together. He heard the roar peak. He heard it cut off. Nothing after that. They ran until hitting a creek, maybe 20 minutes later, maybe 2 hours. They stopped, catching their breath. The Bigfoot raised a long arm and pointed upstream. Then it turned back the way they'd come, east, back to the clearing. Wesley watched until the trees swallowed it, then got in the water. He walked that creek for 4 days. He remembers little, eating unknown berries, catching a small fish bare-handed and eating it raw, lying exhausted in the creek bed with water rushing over his legs. He remembers blindingly bright stars and the chilling lack of animal sounds. No owls, no coyotes. On the 4th morning, he stumbled onto a dirt road near Elkins. A woman in a sedan almost hit him, pulled him into her passenger seat, and called 911. Deputies and an ambulance arrived. He was treated for dehydration, exposure, and shock. His story was filed as confusion secondary to dehydration. I have seen the intake sheet. Jonah Prescott was reported missing 2 days later after skipping a family dinner. Search and rescue found his vehicle on Route 33. They photographed the caved roof and hood gouges. The preliminary report read, "Probable bear activity, possibly sow with cubs defending a food source." Direct quote. They tracked footprints a quarter mile before losing them. No campsite, no gear. On day 2, they brought dogs, which outright refused to pass a certain ridge line. Both dogs turned and dragged their handlers back to the vehicles. The search ended after 11 days. Jonah was listed presumed lost to the elements. His wife still calls Wesley monthly. He never knows what to say. That's Wesley's story. Here's what I've found since. There's been a drop-off. I don't want to sound crazy, but if you scour the cryptid forums, tall figure sightings in the Central Appalachians plummeted after late 2022. They didn't just drop, they stopped. One subreddit used to see multiple Monongahela Bigfoot posts monthly. Since November 2022, there's been exactly one obvious fake. Same with the wolf things. Farming communities in Pendleton and Randolph used to swap stories of bipedal livestock thieves. I called 3 feed stores. All agreed the stories stopped a couple years back. An older guy in Randolph told me, "I hadn't thought about it until you asked, but yeah, nobody's brought that up in a while." Hunters say the Monongahela itself is quiet now. 4 different seasoned hunters told me deer and bear signs are way down. Bird activity is thin. One told me, "It doesn't feel like a forest anymore. It feels like something somebody's using." I don't know what to do with that. Wesley thinks he knows. He believes the breathless thing is the oldest entity in that forest, predating Bigfoots and werewolves. For a long time, the native predators maintained a truce, drawing a line around those flayed trees and standing vigil for centuries, until it pushed, and they lost. Now it's out. I asked if he really believed that. He was quiet, then said, "I don't believe it. I just know it." I asked what he meant. He pointed through the sliding glass door, saying the tree line used to be further away. When he moved there in 2023, the woods were 100 yards past his fence. Now they're closer. Just a few feet at a time, but creeping closer. Watch the tree line long enough, you start to see it. I looked. I didn't see anything moving. That's not how it works. But walking to my car, I stared back at the woods behind his building longer than I meant to. Gray, quiet trees. No birds, no squirrels. Completely motionless. This is what sits in my chest at night. Jonah's final choice. The Bigfoot picked him up, and he didn't fight. His calm face, like he'd worked something out. He knew 2 pulses moving south would sound louder than 1 running west. He let the Bigfoot carry him because he understood the creature's sacrifice and knew it was the only play left. I think about the young Bigfoot too, running Wesley to the creek, pointing him upstream, then turning back. Neither had to. Both did. I don't know what to call that in an animal, or in anything. Before I left, Wesley said something I initially refused to write down. The thing doesn't want the woods. It wants hearts. And there's a lot more hearts in town than in a forest. I had no answer. Still don't. I'll leave you with this. If you live near the Appalachians and notice your woods are quieter, the deer gone, the coyotes silent, the tree line sitting a bit closer than it used to, maybe it's just logging or climate. Or maybe the old sentries are gone. Something ancient is no longer contained, moving slow and steady toward the sound of your pulse. You decide. Wesley will never return to the Monongahela. He still checks his lock and watches the tree line. He's thinking of moving west, out of the Appalachians to open ground where he can see what's coming. I asked if that would help. "I don't know if anything helps," he said. "I just know I'd rather see it." That stuck with me. That's where I'll leave it.